When I started working, of course, National Instrument 43-101 didn't exist. So we all had to turn our heads to that. But it's almost 25 years later. So more people do know it exists. There's still some people that think we're out to get them. And I hope that we've made an effort to dissuade them of that.
There are important changes to National Instrument 43-101 coming up that everyone working with these codes needs to be aware of. And as we all know, there is nothing better than talking reporting code updates for even the most introverted geologist to join a party and lock horns to argue reasons for or against change. But this reporting code conversation is different to the ones I've had before on this channel. Vicky Yehl, having worked for the British Columbia Securities Commission for 9 years, isn't only just well informed about upcoming changes, she can talk about it in a light and fun, yet energetic way. That's important when we need to communicate sometimes dry or boring sounding stuff and to get through to a wider audience. In this chat, she guides me through some of the key changes and lifts the lid on how she and her colleagues deal with the occasional display of willful ignorance, changes to other reporting codes, and some of the bright sides of working in regulation, like mentoring younger professionals making their footsteps here. And now I'll bring you Victoria Yehl.
Quite excited about this because, as people will know, I'm always quite excited to talk about compliance and regulation and all those wonderful things. And I really always, enjoy listening or to what you say in your posts that you put out every now and then. You put a few really interesting things out on LinkedIn that I pick up. And for the people listening, we've tried to get together a couple of times, I think. But I think it's good timing now, maybe to have a chat because there's a number of things changing around the world in compliance space. And but maybe for those who don't know you, because there are listeners from all over the place, but particularly our Australian listeners might not be familiar with who you are and what you do. Do you mind just giving us a bit of a background? You said your husband is a geologist, so that's a great start. But where do you come from?
I'll get in trouble. Not actually the husband, just the partner.
Okay, all right.
I've heard a great phrase, "the bloke in the house," which I borrowed from someone else, so we can use that.
Call him that.
But I'm a geologist, and I was trained in Canada, but I worked around the world prior to joining the BC Securities Commission. I was an exploration geologist with a senior tiered mining company and worked on multiple commodities just about everywhere. Not New Zealand, though. I did make it to Australia several times, but never stopped in New Zealand. And about 10 years ago, just actually 9, I made a change. I wanted to be at home a little bit more. So joining the Securities Commission, or one of the Securities Commissions here in Canada, I was able to do that. And it brought a new challenge to look at things not from the how to do it side, but the how to disclose it side. So the Securities Commissions across Canada do employ technical people. They employ both geologists and engineers. And so that's what I did a few years ago. So it's been fun. It's been interesting. It's a little bit different. It's a career shift. Yeah. And it allows me to talk to a lot of different people about a lot of different things. And that's always fun, because I think one of the things that geologists quantify their life by is how much fun they're having. I think it's one of the first questions we ask our colleagues are you having fun? Yeah, and then it's, well, what projects are you working on? So
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting, because if you say compliance, and most people probably go, well, that's boring, but like you said, you see a lot of different things, and you're probably part of a whole bunch of different conversations. And I'm generally always very interested in it, but it's not for everyone. And I've asked some other people before in this space, what drew you to this particular space? I mean, other than perhaps life decisions or just being home a little bit more as a geologist, which is difficult to do. But I mean, it takes a few specific skills to be, let's just call it good at that, right? What on your side, what are those things that you think make you good at this or excited about it as well?
Well, I get paid to read technical reports. Come on, that's awesome. That's reading about new and different geology in every commodity every day.
Yeah.
I'm an avid reader in general, so it takes a little bit time. It's very different because, of course, we all have our own way we would go out and conduct exploration or mining work. We all have different experiences. We're all specialists in different commodities. So it takes a little bit of time when you act as a regulator or you perform the role of a regulator. It takes a little bit of time to switch your lens and your view a little bit, such that you're saying, okay, we're not regulating how you do it. That's for organizations like CIM or SME in the United States and some of the equivalents in Oz in New Zealand and that sort of thing. We're regulating how you disclose it because the disclosure is intended for the public so that they can make informed investment decisions. We're also supposed to be making sure that the disclosure rules and complying with those disclosure rules allow exploration and mining companies to raise capital and continue doing what they're doing. So it's a big learning. It's like an entirely a new place to flex your brain and think about. And we have to follow very much here in Canada, of course, National Instrument 43-101, hence why we're talking today. But we can't go about and say, this is what we'd like to see. It's got to be what the rule, which is how we refer to National Instrument 43-101, which is part of securities law. It's what it says. So it's a lot of learning different nuance I know how to use a rock hammer. I know how to collect samples. I know how to submit them to a lab. That's very different.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and I do have a bunch of questions that, and you've already put a key one out here, right? It's not how you've done the work, but what you've done, and so on. That's obviously a big discussion here as well. And I'm going to come back to that point later, apart from a few other things. But coming back to the question in terms of, so you said something along the lines of, I enjoy reading reports, but there's got to be some weak moments and strong moments mixed in all of those experiences, right? Because I like reading reports and I like reading good reports, but if it's Friday afternoon and I'm reading a shit report, then I might get a little bit less excited about life, right? How do you still pick up a report or see something you think, wow, and you just think, we're doing a pretty good job as an industry, right? And get genuinely excited about that. And then maybe as a follow-up question to that, do you then end up sharing that amongst your peers as well? Like, hey, folks, this is pretty good or this is pretty average. How do you, do you guys have a little working group there where you share these good and bad experiences?
I'll start with the first part and then shift to how we share our experiences, because we do that. Sometimes Friday afternoons, particularly in the summer when it's a nice day, I would far rather be outside having a pint with friends and colleagues than sometimes reading reports. It's really interesting to see new people. The industry as a whole does do a good job. I would definitely agree with those statements, but often it's actually kind of rewarding to talk to people who start writing technical reports and signing off on the disclosure when they first start to do that as a qualified person or in your neck of the woods, competent person. They often haven't put that twist twist on it. It's not for talking to other geologists or other engineers. We're really good at doing that. We're really good at talking to ourselves. And we're really good at sharing information because we know what we're talking about. And it's reminding people that the mindset is actually to give disclosure for non-experts. And that's baked right into writing technical reports. So we actually hope that we're helpful in that regard. And we often have calls or emails with people and they say, let us give you background. And we're like, that's great. You know more about your project than we do. And you keep doing all the things that you think are important. and we're just going to keep you. I like to say that we're the guardrails on the highway. We're there to keep you on the road, and we're going to keep you heading down that path, whatever that path is. So when you do make your disclosure, you do it so that we don't put you on any bad lists, and that you can proceed with your project and you can raise money and continue to do what you're going to do. I mentioned that there's 8 of us across Canada. Yes. So we don't have one regulator. We're not like the United States where they have the SEC. We have a commission or an agency like that in each of our provinces and territories. And so for mining, which encompasses both exploration and mining, people get confused, but we call it the Canadian Securities Administrator Mining Group. We have 4 people here in Vancouver. We have 2 people, and all 4 of us are geologists. We have 2 geologists in Ontario, and we have 2 engineers. Well, two engineers and a geologist in Quebec. The geologist has another role, but she weighs in at certain times. And we talk regularly. We have monthly video calls with one another. We bring up what projects we're working on, what reviews. We do try to keep it confidential because we find that we can talk to companies better if they feel that they're not going to be punished for asking questions and things like that. And our goal isn't to punish. The goal of it, particularly the BCSC's team, because it's our mandate on our website, and I can only speak for that, although I'm not speaking on behalf of the Commission right at the moment. These are my personal views. But we're here to foster a culture of compliance. So we're not supposed. That's why I say we're the guardrails, right? We're not here. And we're not here to go out and get anybody. We're not here to punish you. We really do want. We'll send a comment letter, and we will say fix your disclosure.
Do you feel that? Sorry to jump in there, but do you feel that? Because that sounds like a fairly reasonable position, and we're here to help and all that. Do you feel that all of the guide rails that create some sort of anxiety around people, particularly the younger people doing this for the first time? I'm pretty sure, like you said, I enjoy talking to those people, and I would see why. But there is probably some guidance you can help people with, and they're probably more anxious than they should be because we're all trying to do the right thing and a good thing and so on. But then there will also be some people from the sidelines that are constantly complaining, which is easy to drag you down again on that Friday afternoon as well. Is there? So on balance, I guess there's more fun there than there is not. But have you seen a shift in that at all? Is it just is everybody? Is that just a status quo situation, or is everybody kind of settling down as the decades roll on around this compliancy?
I think there's definitely different groups of people. I think older folks, which I actually fall in that category. When I started working, of course, National Instrument 43-101 didn't exist. So we all had to turn our heads to that, but it's almost 25 years later, so more people do know it exists. There's still some people that think we're out to get them, and I hope that we've made an effort to dissuade them of that. We answer our phones. If you call me, I will answer my phone. If I don't answer my phone and you leave a message, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If I don't answer my phone right away, I'm in a meeting and things like that. There are people that think phoning the regulator is a bad thing, or emailing the regulator is a bad thing, and it's going to make you the subject of a review. But I think it's like playing a board game. We sort of give you grace if you phone and ask for some guidance or ask for some help or need a point in the right direction. We will absolutely do that, and we don't write you down or chalk you into a database and say, oh, they're next on the list. We give everyone, or at least I hope we do, we give everyone the benefit of the doubt and think they are trying to do the right thing. No one sets out. I don't think, for the most part, well, some people may, we can think REX. I don't think most people set out to fleece the world. I think most people, most geologists and engineers in this space want to do good work. They want to progress a project. They want to share that story. It may be in very technical language, but we just had one of our group calls last week. I think it was last week. We also talk with our practice standard setter, which is CIM, Canadian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy and Petroleum. For those of you who might not know who it is. We participated in a call with them today, as a matter of fact. Okay. We will come out and talk about this to anyone who asks us to. So we have the BCSC goes to the Roundup conference here in Vancouver. We actually man or woman a booth, a booth, I guess, and we will take your questions and things like that. So some people are still very afraid of the regulator. But we hope that they wouldn't be.
Well, let me get back to that specific point later, because I think that's the topic of the different kind of groups, right? Because there's a group who are slightly more, probably more ignorant, which is the problem, and there's only a tiny group of people who are, as you to use your word, fleece the market, and there's very few of those, and every once in a blue moon you see a thing where you go, come on, that really doesn't fly. But there's also a group of people that think that certain things are okay, but when you objectively look at it, you say, folks, that's not transparent at all. You're just telling yourself that it is, right? So they're sort of floating on the middle. So I'd like to come back to that, because that's quite a tricky subject, because who are we catering for instance, when these new regulations come in, or when they need to be updated? Which part of that group are we actually catering the changes to? Because the people who will fleece, they will fleece, and it doesn't really matter what you do. And the people who are ignorant are going to remain ignorant, because they need to actually do their homework, right, to become less ignorant. And if they don't do that, you can come up with as many new regulations as you want. So the new regulations is only for a subgroup of people that actually wants to do the right thing, is educated enough to have read all the rules, and is just confused by one or two or a few things, and therefore needs to have more clarity. And that might be a good segue to actually maybe get onto this. I guess the reason why we got together in the first place is to discuss the changes, because as you probably know, I've been sort of laterally involved with some changes in the JOR code, and that is still a process that is ongoing. So I take a deep interest in these changes, and I've been watching what's happening on your side of the world. So I've got here a printout, because I can't remember all the details here, and there's some things I find more interesting than others, so I've tried to flag those. But with that backdrop of who this is intended to cater to, and I don't want to go straight to the answer or the full discussion on that. Perhaps I want to first go through the actual changes, and not one by one, because I think that can get boring, and we're not here to rattle off a list that people can download as well. But I've got a few specific questions on the changes, and then later on I want to come back to how this is going to help us all get better. But before I do so, the changes in general, when I read through them, and I have the same response to the JORC changes. The JORC changes are far more significant in terms of structure and writing and everything around it. But as I'm trying to argue sometimes ad nauseum on either this channel or over a beer, when it really comes down to it, nothing really has changed. I mean, you can call a PEA a scoping study now, but at the end of the day, it's the same beast. We just put a different name on it. So my question to you is, maybe as we maybe get into some of these things that have changed, are all of these coming out of a long process of you guys observing what's going on? Then I see there's a system where you go back to the market and ask for people's opinions. and you just collate that all in a big Excel spreadsheet, and you go top down from where you get the most comments, and you start addressing those. Is that sort of what the process here is as well, or is it a little bit? Is there?
Sort of. Normally, what's happened in the past for 43-101, and this is before my time, but I will absolutely try to explain it to the best of my ability. Normally, the Canadian Securities Administrator, the umbrella group for everyone, has gone forward and said, here's the changes we think we're going to make. We kind of turned it on its head a little bit, and we put out what we call a consultation paper. And we did that in 2022. I can't believe it's that long ago. And we asked a variety of questions, 38 questions. And those were drawn from our tracking of reviews, and again, trying to build this culture of compliance. So improve disclosure for the public so that they can make informed decisions and so that they can have confidence in the capital markets. So those 38 questions came very much from what we were seeing in reviews, what we've been sending around in comment letters, and that kind of thing. And so what we did is ask those questions, and then we got an overwhelming response, more than if we'd actually proposed changes at the time. We got 85 comment letters, which is amazing. And so we set our minds to, because we asked the questions because we weren't sure whether we needed to update 43-101 or not. Okay. And so we set our mind to, were these significant? Were there things that really weren't working? And a few things came out that we needed to clarify. We didn't actually change them. We clarified things. And there's a bunch of things that were in place for 25 years ago. And they likely aren't needed anymore. A couple of things we've revisited. They were originally in the rule, and everybody did a good job, and now everybody's forgotten about how to make that disclosure. So we brought something back as well. And then we looked at the usefulness of some of the technical report triggers and some of the people who were writing technical reports and providing them to the public, and were these actually useful for the public. Yeah. So we also tried to understand who's using, like, is the public actually using technical reports? Because we didn't have any evidence one way or another. And so we actually did some short surveys at investor conferences. Not sure everybody on your side of the planet would be familiar with what used to be called, many years ago, the Gold Show, became Cambridge House, and is now VRIC, the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. I didn't know that. And there's actually retail, like mom and dad, who invest their $3,000 in a mining company. They actually come to VRIC. So we the BCSC paid the folks at VRIC to help us out and conduct a short survey. It was literally a 3-question survey to find out whether people actually knew what National Instrument 43-101 was, whether they considered it, and whether they read technical reports. And we were absolutely shocked by the number of people that responded. We surveyed almost, we got answers from almost 700 people. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you don't get to talk to, when you don't get to talk to retail investors very often, like those not the big institutions and stuff. So we found that 3/4 of the people we spoke to knew that there were disclosure rules in securities law, and so that was awesome. And then half of those, so just over a third of the people, said that they actually do look at technical reports when they're making investment decisions. So we had guessed that it might be 10 or 15%, and it was around 36 or 37%. So that was phenomenal, we thought. And so we're like, we are serving the public, and that's what the disclosure is for.
I really like this because we have this ongoing debate about the JORC Table 1, which effectively is turning into an NI 43-101 report, right? If you think about it, and then we sort of attach that as a 65-page attachment to the public announcement. And,
It's a long news release.
yeah, let's not go there. I just need to ask for a beer here to facilitate that discussion. But there is an argument that keeps on floating. So who reads these damn things, right? Who is it? Is it just the other consultants or the occasional institutional investor with their whole team of technical advisors, or do the retail investors actually read this? And I would, if you would have, woken me up at 3 a.m. and asked me to quote a number to you in terms of the percentage of mom and pop investors who read that, I would have gone less than 10%. So to hear that is sort of around, and this is assuming that the investors on your side are the same kind of, make and model as they are here. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true, but that's certainly interesting.
I think they would be similar, sort of your neck of the woods in Canada. We have the small junior space and that sort of thing. So we do have people who literally take $500 or $1,000 or $3,000, as I think I said before.
Yeah.
And they think they're buying a dream.
Yeah.
You can watch the Gold Council's Idris Elba Gold show, and it really is. It's the allure of gold, or it's the allure of diamonds, or whatever it is. So the public doesn't necessarily understand that your knife and fork are products of mining. But they do understand things like gold and diamonds and some of those things. So a principle that my former boss, before he retired, taught me, he goes, no one has a right to be misled.
Sure.
So if we can do a better job explaining exploration and mining to people, and if we can also make sure that we understand who's reading disclosure, and that's why we did the survey. And because we'd heard anecdotally from lots of people, nobody but geologists read these, nobody but engineers read these, nobody but bankers read these. So we actually went out because we had hoped for 10 or 15%. We were blown away that it was somewhere between 35 and 37%. Don't think we're naive. We're not naive. I would say most people use social media to get information about stuff. But we only did this survey just after the reins of lockdown and COVID came off. So the survey was recent, within the last 2 or 3 years. So we think that's really informative, and we still look to the changes. And as to your comment, we think we've taken away more things that we don't think are needed anymore. And we think that's feedback from our comment letters. But for our consultation paper, it's our observations from what we're doing. And, we do also get a lot of, I don't want to call them complaints. They're more concerns. The public, the retail investor will call our contact center. It used to be called inquiries, but it's our contact center now, at the BCSC. And they'll say, I don't like this person's disclosure. And we'll actually respond to them and explain they either followed the rule or they didn't follow the rule, and we'll point them to resources where they can learn more about mining and exploration. And so we do think that we thought about the changes in the context of who is our audience, who we think it is, and what can we do to make technical reports or scientific and technical disclosure about mineral projects more palatable for the public, for the investors.
Sure, and maybe just what you just said triggered something about somebody ringing a line of inquiry. Is there a formal process? And if the people do have a significant issue with a particular disclosure, does that run for you instead of phone line, or is there an email? Is there a form to fill out?
There's all of those things. You can call our, again, it's called our contact center. If you go to the BCSC's website, you can email, you can call, you can fill out a form. If you have some sort of information about something that's really bad, we have a confidential whistleblower process where you're anonymous to us. It goes through a third-party system, and we do look and read at all of them. None of them get thrown in a round bin somewhere, never to see the light of day. Our contact center distributes them to the various appropriate sections of the Securities Commission. I know Ontario and Quebec have the same thing. That's where they also have the mining groups, as I described earlier. Alberta has an energy group, which is similar to the mining team, and that's for, of course, oil and gas disclosure. And Alberta has the same thing. You can reach out at any time. We also have a mining page on the BCSC website where we have contact information for all of the mining team, myself, my email, that sort of thing. And if you do email me and say, give me a call back, I will do that. So we do try to be very responsive.
That's very good to know. I mean, things work slightly differently here, I guess, but I might come back to that. But I want to maybe start off by maybe invoking that comparison to things like JORC here and the recent changes here. And one of the questions I wrote down here is were you, and not just yourself, but your colleagues as well, watching the changes here? Because you make a point or not you, but the people who've written this document about the summary of the changes. On page 4, there is a comment that, and I'll just read this out, as CRM definition standards are sufficiently similar to other jurisdictions, we no longer need to allow issuers to rely on other reporting codes. The modernized disclosure requirements, these ones here, remove these defined foreign codes so the technical report disclosure will require disclosure aligned with the CM definitions of mineral reserves, and mining studies. Now, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because obviously there's some changes happening here, but there is still a number of misalignments across the code. I mean, just for one, you say we're aligning with these sort of international codes, but we're sticking to the qualified definition, and we're not adopting the competent word. Now, that could be a wormhole that we never come out of, but I'm interested in that because you very cheekily say in the sentence as well that Canada's mining disclosure regime is recognized internationally as the standard, not a standard, the standard for mineral project disclosure. So I'm just tickling you a little bit, obviously, here. But
of course, you're allowed. I love it.
Because I know that, the JORC puts up a good fight in terms of the amount of reports that come out on the global stage. It's actually very close to 50% between the two. And I mean this not to come from a, my code, your code kind of a thing, but I'm genuinely interested as we align all of this stuff. Did you look at the competent person, qualified person? And if not, why not? Haha, pun intended.
Okay, so first of all, the use of foreign codes, it was strictly related to the CIM definitions, and those are for mineral resources and mineral reserves and the various study types. And so CIM is the Canadian member of CRISCO, and they are very much aligned with the CRISCO definitions. So a qualified person is not the same as the competent person in the CRISCO template. We've certainly followed what's been going on with the JORC update. We certainly looked at competent person versus qualified person. And a lot of this goes all the way back to what was in the 70s. People are going to be mind blown by this because I did already make the BRIEX reference. There were some disclosure policies. They weren't part of law yet. In the 1970s, National Policy 2A and National Policy 22. And the first technical report or engineering report was actually filed in Ontario in the late 1950s. Right. But there was a framework for disclosure, and the project was underway before the BRIEX scandal to codify these and make them a part of securities law, these National Policy 2A and National Policy 22. And then BRIEX happened, and then that resulted in the exchanges and the Ontario Securities Commission taking the input from what was called the Mining Standards Task Force, and they generated a report. So the qualified person definition came out of all of that. And so there are some legacy pieces in there, but we did look at it again. And again, we have different rules about being registered as a professional geoscientist or a professional engineer in a jurisdiction of Canada, a little bit different than some of the other parts of the world. And so the foreign code that we acknowledged was strictly limited to the definitions of mineral resources, mineral reserves, and study types that CIM holds for us. And that we incorporate by reference. So I think I wound my way through that.
Well, I wasn't laying any mind traps there.
No.
But I'm just genuinely interested in that alignment, because there's a very good argument to make for further alignment between the codes. And we, if I say we, it's probably a very broad we. But in discussions in updating the JOR code, we look at all these concepts as well. And again, we look at the changes on that side. I mean, why should we not also go to a full technical report? I mean, this is a genuine question to follow that principle of the NI 43-101 requirements to lodge a report, rather than further Frankenstein the table 1 into some sort of format that is going to solve all the world's problems. But then you get also stuck into the alignment of nomenclature and terminology. So, and this is one obvious place to be looking is whether keywords like, inferred, indicated, measured, etc., whether they actually align across the board, and qualified person and competent person. But I think that can get quickly get quite complex, and I don't think there's anything here that's changing anyway. So let's try to stick to the actual changes. But I thought it was interesting to sort of see what your thoughts on that were.
I don't want to put words into any of my colleagues' mouths, but in general, and again, the broad we, what we do see is that the CRISCO definitions from the CRISCO template, I think if you talk to whoever's the head of CRISCO right now, and I do know I'm just not going to invoke him here because that would unfortunately put him on the spot, and he's not here to weigh in. So much more of the world is aligned to CRISCO now, and there's the bridging document from the United Nations stuff and things like that. Everyone's moving in that same direction. So because, for inferred, indicated, and measured, etc., we're all very aligned. The SEC in the United States has come on board. Now they've baked in their definitions right into SK 1300. So it would be harder for them to change them should CRISCO make updates, or in our case, should CIM make updates. But we see that, the categorization and classification of resources is sufficient, that I don't think we need to, at this point, say, if you're talking about an indicated resource under JORC, it's going to be the same numbers under National Instrument 43-101, and it's going to be the same numbers under SK 1300 and anything else. So we've never accepted a JORC Table 1 as a proxy for a 43-101 technical report. And we're just not going to start, but we didn't think that foreign code recognition, because the United States and the SEC came into line in recognizing mineral resources, we thought it was, you can just report them as CIM definition standards. You had to reconcile them to CIM definition standards anyway. So we've just taken out a middle step, perhaps.
Well, that's what I was going to say, baby steps, right? Because I mean, at least we're moving closer towards each other rather than further away. Let's and it's like you said, it's only 25 years. And I do have my last question here. What do you see in long term for the future, right? Do you see further alignment? But let's park that for later. But that kind of fits in.
It could happen. It could happen.
And there are people working towards it. So
I think we do talk to our counterparts in Australia on occasion. We do talk to our counterparts at the SEC. I think we're going to be talking to folks with PERC. And so we do try to stay in touch, and we're certainly always open to that sort of dialogue and conversation. We've had great feedback from folks in Australia about some of the things we do that they don't, and that they do and we don't. And we're always interested to hear their perspective.
Yeah, well, I've got a few of these marked here, so maybe those are already things that have been discussed between the groups. But maybe if I start with one of the changes, so I'm skipping a few on the first pages. People can look these up. I'll put a link in the description for people who get as excited as we do about this sort of stuff, and who haven't already tuned out with dribble coming out of the corners of their mouths. But the scoping study, right? So this is a pretty fundamental change. The PEA is no longer. We're calling it scoping study now. And I'm just quoting here. It replaces definition of preliminary economic assessment in the current instrument. PEA disclosure has been an area of significant non-compliance, particularly related to disclosure of a PEA after establishing mineral reserves, which has led to staff interventions and refiling of technical reports. Now, I think, speaking again from a jurisdictional perspective, scoping studies have been an ongoing concern on this side as well, but perhaps for slightly different reasons that I wanted to challenge you on. In terms of allowing people to use a certain amount of inferred resources to underpin scoping studies, have you looked at that balance at all from whether you want to further regulate that, or whether you're allowing, you're also redefining exploration target, which in a scoping study on the JORC could be part used in a scoping study. Have you looked at that? And if so, what's the outcome of that?
Well, first of all, our PEA definition, I think that 43101 has taken a lot of criticism since that was put in, I believe, the 2011 modifications. And in 2012, we had to put out what's called a staff notice to give additional boundaries for the PEA. But the PEA was always criticized for being a non-definition in the rule. It was a carve out to doing economic analyses on resources themselves. We've certainly talked about the amount of inferred that might be used. But the PEA was defined as what it's not, as opposed to what it is. So the CIM MRMR committee, which is what we call them, the Mineral Resources and Mineral Reserves Committee, and I know they're now a society, so they're going to be upset with me because I probably got that wrong. And I didn't mean to. It's just learning new terms is not as easy at 55 as it was at 25. Yeah. But so we've been in touch with CIM for a long time to have them take ownership of scoping study and, of course, make it somewhere more Crisco-esque. And exploration target we had is also a carve out of our restricted disclosure. But we really thought that the right places for those definitions are with our practice standard setter, who is the member of Crisco. And because the PEA definition was a non-definition, what it isn't, as opposed to what it is, we really leaned on the folks at CIM to craft that for us. So we think it's better suited. You don't want the regulator making non-definition definitions, as we saw. So
the reason
I think it's got a better home now.
So no, I don't disagree with that, but the problem is that when those statements, when financial or production target statements are ultimately made in these reports or announcements, that has a direct impact on the market, and the reasonable basis of that might therefore be challenged, right? So this is the interface between indeed the regulator and in your case, the CIM. And I do think, that needs to be a joint approach, because you can lay out the foundations, but people will seek to find the boundaries of that as fast as they can possibly find them, which is exactly the reason why also ESIC came out with a information sheet soon after the scoping study definitions were launched here, because people were abusing it and either deliberately misunderstanding it or some version of that. So I'm just, given the pain and the hassle that we had to go through here on those changes, I was interested to hear your thoughts on how that was considered, because again, you can take some learnings from other jurisdictions as to how tricky these, and they're still to this day causing frequent
issues on the market with scoping studies not relying on reasonable basis to make certain statements. So.
Okay, so the inner workings of this, we've had lots of discussions on this topic. We're not sure that this is going to solve the problem entirely, but we do think that, and the new definitions from CIM are also out for public comment right now, if you weren't aware. So the 3 new definitions that are going in are also available for public comment. So it'll really go back to them, and they have guidelines, guidance that goes around those as well. And we may get feedback during this process for public comment because it isn't fully baked yet. We're not going to be enacting these until the comment period closes. We will take the comments that we receive and seriously consider them. We do expect that we will get some or a good number, I would hope, around this shift. So it remains to be seen, but we need a place to start the conversation, and we did look at that's actually one of the things. The last time we talked to JORC folks, we had that discussion, but that's absolutely what we talked about was the scoping study PEA. So we don't know that we've got these revisions perfect. In fact, some people will always be unhappy with whatever is proposed. But we had to give people a place to start, and this was from all of our feedback, all of our examples, and from all of the consultation things that we had heard in their broader sense. So
that's very nice. Yeah. Oh, it's always work in progress, I guess, with these things, and you'll get people with different opinions on this scoping study piece, and we've certainly gone through that here as well. But it's fine. I'm happy. That makes a lot of sense. Maybe just going to the personal inspection requirement, and there's only a minor change, but something that some people might be interested in learning. But you're getting rid of the fact that there's something. These visits, they just have to happen, and you can't say it was due to weather anymore because that wasn't really invoked frequently anyway. Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
That's fair. We'll call it the seasonal weather deferral. That's how we term it. It was actually put in place for a very specific circumstance. It was incorporated in the rule, and this will tell you exactly when this rule was first crafted. It was because of the diamond rush in Canada's Northwest Territories, and people were map staking claims. And they couldn't get there in the winter, and everybody wanted all the claims. And so there was no way literally to get into the Arctic and do a current personal inspection. So it was put in place for that circumstance. That circumstance doesn't exist anymore. And over the last few years, we went into all of the technical reports filed. And what we saw is when this was invoked, it was never followed up. They said, we didn't do this because of the seasonal weather deferral. And then they didn't actually go and do the current personal inspection and then refile the technical report when it was done. So it wasn't serving its purpose anymore, and the circumstance that caused it to be included doesn't exist anymore.
But maybe just to double check something, because obviously COVID was something that caused some inconvenience from a site visit perspective, and we've had a few of those ourselves where we had to collaborate with people who were actually able locally to go do the site visit, but it wasn't ideal because, they're not part of the technical team working on it. You can't travel yourself. And there are some other situations where you physically can't do a site inspection. We do a lot of work in the seabed mineral space, and it's pretty hard to go to the CCZ and float on a boat and say, okay, there are nodules here, because there aren't, because you can't dive down to the ocean floor and say, hey, I've got a nodule in my hand. So am I just taking this all way too literally, or do we still have the ability as qualified persons to say, look, sorry, we couldn't go there because of circumstances that were outside of our control? Or is it and because somebody told me, no, this is legal. You have to do it. If you can't do it, you're in trouble. How can I see that?
Well, so for the COVID circumstance, we've very much. This was definitely considered. I wasn't involved in the considerations because I wasn't sitting in the same role at that time. And it was discussed across the Canadian Securities Administrators. And it wasn't because mineral exploration and mining was deemed an essential service in most places. We were still able to do what we do. And so we don't want anyone to put themselves at risk. That's not. So we've also had people self-exempt for safety reasons, like the property is under siege, which is a clue about the risk on the property. Yes. But we didn't have the expectation, but we put what's called blanket orders out during COVID, and it said either wait until it's safe to visit, hire someone in that jurisdiction to conduct your current personal inspection. Or, do whatever quarantining and things like that were required. Right. But we had a couple of people very upset that we were suggesting that you put yourself at risk.
Right.
But we didn't make, we did make the decision after much discussion. And it's the one thing about current personal inspections. We got the feedback from our consultation paper. It was overwhelming. It was the greatest responses that we had, and they all aligned that the current personal inspection was a critical element of a technical report in any study. So, because we asked, could you be able to conduct one using a drone or satellite technology or whatever it is? And we overwhelmingly got no. You need boots on the ground still.
You're putting a consultants out of work here, I'm just joking.
But no, we don't want to put people at risk. But if and with nodules is very specific. What we've actually had done is some of the ships that are going into these various places, the qualified person has visited the ship and either seen the collection of the nodules or that. Again, the disclosure standard is principle based. We try to stay. I know that sometimes people interpret 43-101 to be very prescriptive, but most of the concepts are principles. So when it comes to nodules, we haven't said, visiting the ship isn't
acceptable.
Isn't acceptable. We haven't been unreasonable in that regard. It's like there is a small company that's proposed mining on the moon. Don't know how reasonable that really is.
I was just going to flick to RPEEE. So now that we're on this,
So space mining of asteroids, I don't know, but those would also fall in the area of you probably can't do a current personal inspection. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you can make a movie about it, it's possible, right? So I'm pretty sure.
I guess so. I guess if I'm growing potatoes in my own poop and things like that.
Exactly, it's possible. It's no, let's not go there too, but that makes a lot of sense, and I think that you brought the principles based into that topic is actually quite useful, because I mean we've never had pushback on it either, and we've signed off on a number of seabed nodule resources exactly that under NF 43-101. So we probably would have heard if we couldn't, but I've always found that interesting. From a legislative perspective, I just maybe going to the mineral resource disclosure on page 6 here, and I'm aware that I don't want to sit here for 3 hours going through 25 pages either. I'm sure you have other things to do as well. So I'm trying to cherry pick some interesting changes here, because by and large, when I read through it, I go, all of that makes sense, and there's some changes here and some improvements here. I did pick up some nuance to the language here, because it says, there is deficiencies in disclosure observed, and particularly the information about reasonable prospects of eventual economic extraction, which is obviously very similar. That was top of our list here as well, RPEEE. But the irony is that it was already there, really. So, and it was already there in the JOR code, but people weren't doing it. And now we're just telling them to really, really do it. Is the really, really making the difference here in language, or how do you see that?
I think it's mostly the really, really.
Right.
It's really not a policy shift for us.
Exactly.
It's exactly like what you just said about JORC.
Yeah.
It's really the key assumptions and parameters, which is how it was phrased before. We've just sort of reinforced that with the really, really concept. No, you really have to do this.
Really. I just wanted to clarify that, because you also have classification in here, which we didn't quite focus on from a disclosure prominence, which I found interesting. So it must mean that you guys see that people are talking too loosely about how they've classified their resources, which I probably agree with, but haven't really.
We've had a lot of feedback. We also have an advisory committee for the CSA mining group that's co-chaired by myself and one of the gents in the Ontario team. And we've heard a lot about drill hole spacing, because we put that in there too, so that people can compare apples to apples. So if someone's the intent, again, a sort of a principle-based thing, is if you're estimating inferred at 500-meter spacing between holes and somebody down the block is doing it at 100-meter, we're not going to tell you what the drill spacing is. That's not our role. But it might help a lot of people understand, because a resource estimator, not everybody estimates things the same way.
Sure.
And so, yes, those are key parameters and things like that. But we've had people ask this. We've had other professionals ask this. We've had the public ask this. How do we know that they're the same thing? So maybe if there's a little bit more of that granular information, and whether it's about the RPEE or the RPEE, depending on who you're talking to. That's also a mystery to me anyway. I leave that to the people who do that. So it's just to reinforce that we think that that's disclosure that the public could use for transparency, that, you've used 50-meter spacing for indicated and you want 25 meter spacing or 10-meter spacing for measured. Whatever it is that the person, again, we don't tell you how to do the work. That's not our role. We're telling you how to disclose it. And
no, that's fair enough. I mean, I guess the RPEE thing is probably less of a problem there, or should be less of a problem. But I can certainly see the classification one. We have such poorly aligned standards across the world in how we actually classify mineral resources in the first place, let alone then to actually transparently discuss what we've done. So there might be a little bit of intent to that sometimes. It's not as simple as the average drill spacing. And if it is, then people probably don't really want to disclose that in the first place. So I'm going to definitely watch that. Because you look for that information, right? Because I like gathering exactly that kind of information from reports to understand what other people are doing, and therefore what the technical standard is for classifying a certain deposit as measured. Because I will keep arguing, whether on this channel or on LinkedIn, that between the jurisdictions, your measured isn't my measured. And to be able to point that out with data is quite powerful, I guess, for investors as well. So. I think that could be challenging. We watch, the discussions in chat rooms and stock centers and things like that, where people talk about, and it becomes very obvious that mineral resource estimation and reserves is very much a black box for the public. They don't know that. There's a lot to it, and there's also a bit of and I don't want to diminish it in any way, because I'm actually saying this with the intent of saying it's very important. There's a bit of art to it, as well as all the rigor that's behind it. I would support that 100%.
And I think that's a compliment to resource estimators, because there are some that, they just have that depth of knowledge and they can kind of feel it, I guess. But the public doesn't understand why costs
and they're not interested in your thoughts and
used.
feelings. They just want you to clinically tell them that it's correct.
And it's why sort of black box mineral resource. We always hear there's a website out there. Don't know whether you're familiar with it. It's called Napkin Math. I know we've all sat at a bar and said, "Hey, it could be this many tons and this many ounces and things like that." Yeah. So Napkin Math. It is very much what geos or engineers would sit around the pub talking about, and that's not the rigor that goes behind it. So maybe if some of these small parameters or assumptions or spacings can be disclosed, the public would get a sense of some of that rigor and maybe some of the art that goes into mineral resource and reserve.
Yeah, I like how you described it. I think that's really nicely put, and I think we've got work to do as a community there still. I think, in other words, we need to sort our own stuff out before we can actually explain to investors in enough detail what we've done in that arty process of ours. I've got a couple more.
It's super important, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite important, and it's. But I again, coming back to the point, I was actually quite pleased to see it being called out on that list, because we haven't actually given that as much focus recently on this side. So, but that's good. I've got a couple more things here that there's a change on adjacent properties coming through as well. The cautionary statements, that was always coming, because I guess it is one of those things that you can abuse by invoking neurology a little bit too aggressively. So that's probably in full alignment. It's actually, the regulators here are quite focused on not using neurology, especially if it's on a property that is at a different development stage. So I think that is a alignment that makes perfect sense. And it's a chapter that is buried deep in fire in the report after all the resource and reserve sections, I think, from memory anyway. So I don't think
and that's where we put the current personal inspection. We because of the feedback that's so strong about the current personal inspection, it was buried in what we call item 2. Yes. It was buried at the end of item 2. So now you've got all the room in a day in item 23 to fill your boots and tell us all about your current personal inspection. So we're just like, this is and there's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to the order of things, but because we took away the adjacent properties, because you call it neurology, we call it closeology. Okay. And some people, hey, it doesn't matter. Same word, doesn't matter to me. Right. But we actually had a circumstance where a junior here collected samples on the edge of their claims, and they never really went on to their claims. Yeah. And their next door neighbor has the mineralization, but they actually leveraged all of this. And they'd never done a hint of work on their property, but they kind of made it look like they did. So, people were not getting the real picture, and they had failed to include any of the statements that, what happens in our neighbor's yard is not indicative of what's happening in our yard, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's clear. That's good information. I think the only one that's left here that I made a comment on, and one that I actually, find personally quite frustrating to deal with in the document, because I don't really care much about the order, and people give it a bad name, this clunky format. It kind of makes sense to me. I don't really, once you meander through it a bunch of times, it makes sense. And some sections you might put in a different location, and if we so what we, for instance, do with RSC, we actually use the NF4 3-1 format as a baseline, and then we shift certain sections around to just make the reports flow better by having because there is a little bit of a clunkiness about exploration by the owner and then drilling, and why is drilling not exploration? Is that really necessary? And then we do this, and then we have the data verification, and why is it? So we move around with that space, but by and large, I think it's actually quite a nice format, because at least people know exactly where to look every single time, and that outweighs, I believe, most of the downsides to it. So there, I've staked my claim. However, after starting with a positive, the data verification thing, that kills me, because, and I, without having a gripe here, why is it not data verification and validation? And it is not specifically clear either from the Form 1 or from the supporting, guidelines from CIM, which I have printed out here. And I've gone actually to quite a bit of effort to try and figure out what, and I'll say you guys, a very derogative term in this instance, but obviously as a bit of a funky jibe here. Why is it that every report that I review has such a complete waffle championship going on in that section, that it almost appears to me that nobody really knows what needs to go in there? And that's a bold claim, obviously, and I don't want to just go to extremes to try and push a point, but it has that, because it is here is stated on page 7, where you say many qualified persons incorrectly apply data verification only to exploration and drilling activities and not to other technical data. Now, that point is well taken, but the fact that they incorrectly apply data verification, because if you look at the CIM guidelines, even though it's defined, you actually talk about accuracy in verification, and in the next section it's part of the validation. And as a reader, you go, what do you guys want? Now, this might be a CIM question more than a regulation question, but maybe as a question to you, did that data verification chapter get any challenges in your 80 responses, or does everybody understand what's required there except for Rene Sterk?
Well, I think there are lots of places where data verification does get misunderstood. Yeah, that's fair. I can say that. I'm okay with that. It right now is a formal definition in the instrument. So the form is do this, and it really is. When QP opines on the suitability of the data that they've taken responsibility for the disclosure of, and they said that it's accurate and things like that, it's what steps did they take? The whole idea is they say, what did they do that gave them confidence in that data, that in their professional opinion it was good? And if they couldn't verify the data, what was the limit to that? And it's moved out of the formal definitions that were in 1.1 of the instrument, and it's now, I can't tell you the new number. That's another big change that people will see, is the numbers are different. If you didn't notice that, the numbers in the instrument itself are very different. That's a legal drafting thing. So I can't tell you. I could look it up. I've got papers over here. I could look it up. But data verification is just a section in the instrument now rather than a formal definition, because the concept is if you can verify it, and this has always been the case, you should. And it's literally a description of what did you do, and it's not what did others do, but what did you do.
No, I get that concept, but maybe
that's it.
No, but maybe specifically, why isn't it called data verification and validation? Because the CIM guidelines make this whole poo-ha about the difference between validation and verification, and then in this the chapter title is data verification. So, am I supposed to talk about validation there as well? Or because if you call out its difference in the supporting guidelines, then you should probably align that with the actual instrument as well, if you know what I mean. That's probably
It's something we can certainly consider, Rene. I hadn't actually thought about it that way. So again, this is why we put these out for comment. So it's great to have the conversation.
Maybe I should go online and actually do some commenting instead of complaining on a YouTube channel.
Hey, actually, I don't look at it as complaining.
No, it's good.
My partner said, he goes, how's this going to go? Do you know what he's going to ask? And I'm like, no, I have no idea what he's going to ask. And he goes,
I never know.
well, how are you going to be prepared for that? And I'm like, I'm not preparing. I'm just going to talk with him because I've seen his podcasts. And I don't think it's griping. I think it's fair and reasonable. I'm still a PGO. I still call myself a geologist.
Right.
I'm still part of the industry. It's not an us versus you guys.
Absolutely. No. There is no
scenario.
intent here at all, other than to have a bit of a yarn, as they say on this side.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I never prepare for that. Well, I did print some stuff off and said, oh, well, this is interesting. But
it's just a lot.
And actually, I have to be honest. Out of the 43, I think, conversations, this is probably the second time that I've actually printed off any questions. So there you go. I don't think I've actually asked any one of them, but at least I had them printed out. So I won't poke further in that, but maybe I'll follow up with an email because I think from what I see, it causes a lot of confusion. Well, first, it causes a lot of confusion on my end, but now as I look at other reports, because that's what I like doing, if I'm confused and I go to other reports and I go, well, surely there must be some alignment. So but look, I'll come back to that. I did say that I would kind of come back to one question, but now I completely forgot. So see, that's how prepared I am. I think we already gone into those questions. Oh no, I did have one sort of final sort of philosophical angle to this, because I guess at the base of all of this lies this anxiety that I believe is present in about 20% of our industry, and we've done some polls here as well. So that's not just me. It's around 20% of the people that fundamentally believe that we are over-regulating here. And this is not because I can't see any of these changes being anything other than benign, really kind of comments and improvements and efficiency improvements and so on. But in general, as you look at the landscape of compliance and regulation, is that actually happening? Are we constantly putting more rules in? And is that actually helping the mom and pop investor that you just spoke about? Because it's a fair argument, although I will state my claim, I'm firmly in the regulation space for statements I've very carefully laid out on this channel before. So if people want to, then let's go.
Yeah, I've definitely watched some of the other podcasts. So
right. Well, there's the live one and the Jork one I found really interesting because we had some really good people jumping on with questions, and that actually allowed us in a very open forum to kick this around. But maybe to you then, do you feel we're over-regulating, or is there a fear that we do so in the future? And how do you see this particular change sitting in there?
This is going to be entirely my opinion. So I just want to say that again. I'm not speaking for the commission here or for any of the other staff.
Noted.
I would say, I would say that there's a tendency when we modify these things to overregulate. Mm-hmm. That was not our goal. For this project is we wanted to take things away, and we really haven't. The only place we've added stuff, in my personal opinion, is we've added more guidance in the companion policy around the form, around how to generate a technical report. We focused really on clarifying the things that people were confused about and then taking away the things that we don't need. So we've actually, if you do a word comparison, we've reduced the instrument significantly. The form's about the same. It's a little bit smaller, but I think there is a tendency to do more. One of the things that we really wanted to think about and address is technical reports are long, and as you talked about, the 65-page table 1 or whatever goes in the back of the news release.
20 variograms.
Variograms, because we all like to dive right into those.
Hundreds of them.
Yes, we need all of them.
All of them.
All of them. The more, the better.
Yeah.
Don't say that to Mo. I'm sure Mr. Shrivasava would be very upset by that.
Would you?
But I've not met him, so I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But the idea is we'd like people to also remember that a technical report is a summary document.
Yeah.
And it's if you do, say, a feasibility study, if you print it out, might not be one Rene tall, but it's definitely one Vicky tall. I do not have your height. I do feel like we're talking to one another, but every once in a while I can see the monitor, and I look larger than life, and that gives me a little bit more height than I actually have in real life.
Nice. We're at eye height here. Yeah.
Yeah, if I was sitting in the room, I would be looking somewhere lower than at your face.
Jason actually bought some new things for under the chair here that are longer, so that my legs don't actually poke up from the chairs, but we still haven't put them on. So yeah, welcome to my life. Anyway, we're getting distracted.
But what we do want people to remember is it's a summary document. And if you conduct a feasibility study, that feasibility study, if you print it out, will definitely be one Vicky high or more. And so a technical report is a summary of the feasibility study, and it's that information that the public might want to know. And it may not be all the variograms, and it's not a data dump. It's not every assay cert that the project's ever generated. And so that's sort of the intent too, in removing things that we didn't need. We actually had some much grander thoughts and ideas, but they really didn't fly very well. And so no one kind of embraced them. I think every member of the technical team that's involved in this project has their own pet thought that didn't quite make the cut.
Yes.
But I think sometimes the technical report is considered the entire study, and that's not what it should be. A pre-resource or an exploration level report should not be 1,000 pages. And there are 1,000-page early stage reports, and you're like, "Good God, what the hell are you talking about?" And then you have resource reports or pre-feases and things like that, and people nicely get them into less than 150 pages, and that's wonderful.
But do you knock them back? Do you knock the 1,000-page reports back, or do you just say, "Hey, next time, could you not do this to us, please"?
We try to remind people gently. We haven't really knocked back some of those reports. I found one just the other day that the meat of it was about 60 pages, and then there were 2,500 further pages of appendices, which was every piece of work that was ever done. And so we've tried to remind people again, sort of that really, really concept again. Don't put in appendices. If, an appendices is something you don't actually need to read if you summarize things really well. If you're the qualified person, it ties right back to data verification. I looked at 4,000 assay certs. I'm confident in this data. So that's one of the steps really I look. But you don't have to include it in the technical report. So I think the tendency to overregulate definitely exists. I think we all see, not necessarily in this space, but in every space, laws get bigger, rules get more complicated. We've tried not to do that. The feedback we get will maybe help us assess how successful we were at that, but it's managing the life expectancy of a technical report. How long can it stay current? So we tried to think about that, because it costs money to generate these things. And then how long, we don't want the public, nobody wants to read. I don't want to read on a Friday afternoon a 1,200-page technical report. Thank you very much.
No, that makes perfect sense.
And I don't think it has a lot of value for its intended audience. So we hope that people keep in mind it's for the public. It should be understandable, and it is a summary document. So that would be That's why we set out to do what we did. We wanted to modernize and streamline. I think that's in the document you printed out. But those were our goals. We weren't looking to add. We thought mostly it's working well. We thought some of the tweaks that we've made, some people perceive them as changes. We mostly think they're clarifications.
Yes. I got that intention. It was quite well explained. I believe in the document here what the intent is. So I mean, to me, that came through reasonably well. Yeah.
And again, some people do say it's very prescriptive, but it is the principle based, and so we will get some comments. Again, not everyone's going to be happy, no matter what. There's always going to be somebody who's concerned about something. But, we hope that, again, it's the principle based. And when we send you a comment letter, we just want you to improve your disclosure. We do have a team that will give you a traffic ticket while we're the guardrails on the road. But that, for the most part, is not us. We are intending to help you improve your disclosure, because if you have good disclosure, and I think you can tell your story on your mineral project very well under the disclosure rules, securities law, and I think you can promote your project really well without going offside of the rules. And if you do that disclosure well, you're going to attract more investors.
Yep.
You're going to raise more money.
That's the ultimate goal, and that's why we're trying to play our part. So, Victoria, thanks so much for coming online and chatting about this. I mean, I have lots of other things that I could talk about for probably a couple of hours ago, but is there anything that I've missed out that you wanted to touch on from changes or the work that you're doing that I've missed, or?
I don't think so. I think you touched on some of the favorite ones. I will say one of the changes that the legal side of our team for this work is really excited about, royalty streaming issuers. Back when the rule was revised to talk about what was the exemption for royalty issuers. Now we've said these reports, they don't have the ability to get to the data, so they can't do data verification. They most often can't do a current personal inspection. So it's not a useful document for the public. And so we've removed the requirement for royalty issuers, or we've proposed to remove the requirement for royalty issuers to write technical reports. And we think that's a positive step. But whoever thought there would be, 30 or 40 or 50 royalty issuers? When this was first conceived, there were 2 or 3, and I that was back when I was still working for a large mining company. And I can remember a colleague at the time going, this thing will never fly. That's all we're going to get.
And there we are.
And then the company I worked for packaged up a whole bunch of royalties and sold them off to another company. So it was rather funny. But that's one of the ones that a lot of people are really excited about, particularly the royalty companies.
I'm sure that there are less money to spend on reports and people, because it probably doesn't add as much value. And I think that point is quite clearly made. I skipped it because indeed, probably self-interest, because I have nothing to do with those royalty reports. I don't write and don't do them, but I did pick up on it. But I can see how, if it's that many, that would certainly make a difference. So thanks for highlighting that. Thanks again so much. Maybe we should do this again, because at one point you said, maybe we should have a discussion with so-and-so. And it's like, just like this little forum that we had in a live session, it would be really nice to kick these things around with the other with the other CRISCO affiliated member groups, and with the CIM, and talk with some of the technical things and some of the alignments. As we're all in the midst of all these changes, maybe not a good time, but that might be interesting in the future. But thanks again for making the time, and I will put a few links to the documents here that we've mentioned in the description of the video. And
if anyone's interested in providing comments, the public comment period is open until October the 10th.
Excellent.
We genuinely want feedback.
Yes.
We genuinely do consider it, and fortunately or unfortunately, depends who you are. These are not. They're not. We're not going to flip a switch and have these enacted tomorrow. There'll be lots of more warning and lots of time for people to adjust and get used to any changes that are made. So it's at least a year away. I know that sounds like a long time, but as I said, we thought the rule was mostly working very well, and we hope that these changes improve it.
Yeah. No, excellent. So, Victoria, thanks so much for the conversation, and hope we chat again in the future, maybe in person sometime. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.